Should the New York Mets have made a better effort to try to re-sign Marcus Stroman this offseason? I'm going to discuss that on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now on today's show, I want to go back and revisit Marcus Stroman's free agency because it doesn't seem like the Mets ever really had interest in bringing him back. In the first segment, I'm going to talk about how things unfolded. In the second segment, I want to go over where the Mets are now that they don't have Stroman. Obviously, Max Scherzer, a big upgrade, but they still have a void to fill in that rotation. How can they look to fill that? Then finally, in the last segment, I want to go back and envision a scenario where the Mets could have signed both Scherzer and Stroman. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets and about Major League Baseball at justbaseball.com. So if we go back and we just really follow all the tea leaves and think about how free agency played out for Marcus Stroman, he ended up getting what he wanted, but certainly not in the way he wanted to get that contract because Marcus Stroman wanted $25 million a year. That was reported near the end of the season, and that held true. You look at his contract, he got a 3-year, $71 million deal, but the first 2 years of that deal, he'll be making $25 million, and there's an opt-out after that second year. Also, in that third year, essentially a player option, he could make $25 million because there's escalators in that contract. So if he hits 160 innings pitched in each of the next 2 seasons, he'll get $2 million added each year. So that would bring that total to a 3-year, $75 million deal. That's what he wanted. He got what he wanted. He just didn't get the years that he wanted. But when it came to the New York Mets, it never seemed like they really entertained bringing Marcus Stroman back. He made that clear on Twitter, and we can dive into why things unfolded that way. But they clearly prioritized Kevin Gausman and Max Scherzer over Marcus Stroman, and even Robbie Ray to a certain extent, according to reports. So why did they want to go that route? And you look at Robbie Ray and Kevin Gausman, what they ended up getting wasn't completely far off from what Stroman desired. You had Robbie Ray, who got a 5-year, $115 million deal. That's $23 million a year. You have Kevin Gausman, who got 110, which is $22 million a year. So if it's simply based on money, maybe the New York Mets did not think that Marcus Stroman was $40 million more valuable than those two pitchers. And if Stroman set a line in the sand, I want to make $25 million a year, and the Mets basically caved on that notion, I guess you could see how things unfolded. Also, they eventually prioritized Max Scherzer over anything, and Steve Cohen spent an exorbitant amount of money to get that deal done. The one thing I will say that doesn't always come across when you're just following the reports and the tea leaves and everything else is that, free agency happens really quick and you can only do so much. These important conversations that have to be had between the GM, the owner, the agent, all these different things that come into play when you sign a big time free agent, that all happened over such a short period of time before the lockout that, there was only so much time in the day to devote to the free agents you were targeting. So someone like Marcus Stroman, who just went out for the New York Mets, made 33 starts, pitched to a 3.02 ERA. He was going into this free agent period thinking, all right, well, I just proved I can carry his staff. You look at the 2021 Mets, it's not Marcus Stroman's fault that they struggled on the stretch. He was great pretty much wire to wire. Every fifth day, he gave them a chance to win. He did his job, and he did it very well. So he's looking at what he just put up. He's looking at his career numbers, which honestly are pretty favorable to Robbie Ray and Kevin Gausman. If not better, he's at least in the same league. And he's hearing nothing from the New York Mets while they are having conversations with those other top arms on the market. So that's going to make him feel a certain type of way about even trying to discuss a contract down the road. I don't know if the Mets ever would have pursued Marcus Stroman. Let's just say he didn't sign with the Cubs and you go through this lengthy lockout period and then he's still a free agent. Maybe there was a world down the line where these two sides could have come back together. But what happened was the Mets prioritized other arms. And when that happened, that basically broke down the communication. And the question is, was it just money? Or did the New York Mets just want something different? They just want to change up the clubhouse. I mean, they bring in Max Scherzer, a proven winner, and maybe that to them was more attractive than revisiting Marcus Stroman. And that's a very easy argument to make of why you'd want Scherzer over Stroman, even with that, insane price tag that Scherzer came with. But they were also so in on Gausman, and that's what's confusing to me. What's confusing to me is it seems like if things broke the Mets' way entirely, they might have landed Gausman and Scherzer, which would have been a ridiculously expensive rotation. But to me, it's just very interesting that if you were going to pursue that, why weren't you on the phone with Marcus Stroman as well? Because you could have, for the dollar amount that he got, brought back Marcus Stroman as well. And suddenly you look at this rotation right now, and the Mets are sitting pretty with Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, and Marcus Stroman as your three. And then you still have Carrasco and Taijuan Walker, not to mention David Peterson and Tyler Miguel. So it's very interesting. And I think it does maybe enlighten us on their plans moving forward. Maybe they are not going to be in the market for a Carlos Rendon or somebody along those lines when it comes to the top free agent targets. I mean, it's basically Rendon and Kershaw. Don't think you're getting Kershaw outside of that. There's not a ton of big names arms left out there. I talked about Zach Greinke last week. You're looking at more fifth starters or back end starters, which is fine. I don't think the Mets need to shoot any higher than that. But if they are going to go to the trade market to get a Luis Castillo or German Marquez or any of these other big names that are out there, that's going to cost you prospects, which the Mets don't want to spend. And it gets back to the fact that this team has been built on signing free agents to short-term big money deals. And what did Marcus Stroman just sign? A short-term big money deal, which theoretically would have fit into the Mets window perfectly. But maybe they botched things by the way they communicated with him throughout the process. And that's something I want to talk about a little bit more in just a minute, and also talk about where the Mets go from here without Marcus Stroman. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy, Built Bar is a healthy treat that comes covered in 100% chocolate with so many different flavors to choose from. You'll never get bored, whether it's the coconut almond bar, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, my personal favorite, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, or many more. In fact, Built Bar is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So you're going to want to check out built.com often to see what's new and see what you should be snacking on next. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to built.com. Make sure you use the promo code LOCK15 and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. One of the things I'm really interested in when discussing the Mets starting rotation right now is trying to figure out what the goals were going into this offseason. Was the goal to add two top-tier arms? Maybe. I mean, like I said, there was reporting at the time when they were interested in Gausman and Scherzer that if they could have landed both, that they might have tried to. But Gausman ends up signing with the Blue Jays. The Mets go completely all in on Scherzer. They get that deal done. And that alone is enough to address their rotation this offseason, in my opinion. I know that there is this big push to add more. And I think that it would be wise to bring in another starting pitcher that can compete for that fifth job. But I look at the rotation right now, and I've said it so many times this offseason, so it's going to sound like a broken record at this point. But, you're talking about Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, Carlos Carrasco as your 1, 2, 3. And I know that there is Mets fans who are focused solely on the 2021 season that saw what Carrasco did and think he's washed up. I don't believe that's the case. 2020, he was excellent. He had a really interesting and unique year in 2021 with the hamstring injury and trying to rush back. I think he's going to be fine this year. And with that, knowing that Taijuan Walker was an all-star this past year that just had an absolutely horrendous second half, maybe he gets another full off season. He gets more conditioned to go through a full year. Maybe his arm just got tired this past year. Maybe Taijuan Walker is closer to the first half version of himself than the second half version, or at least he's somewhere in the middle and can be a solid 4-starter for you. I like Peterson. I like McGill. There's other depth the Mets have right now in Trevor Williams and Jordan Yamamoto, not to mention Adam Oller and Jose Butto that got added to the 40. There's options. So if the whole offseason was let's just get the highest impact starting pitcher we can, they got Max Scherzer, that's a win. But if we think about the other moves the Mets made, I think they were really counting on Noah Syndergaard to return. With that, as they were pursuing other free agents, as they are meeting Mark Canha, it's Sandy Alderson on his birthday, hops on a jet to meet Billy Epler, to meet Mark Canha and his wife for lunch. There was a lot that had to happen during free agency, a lot of different people they had to talk to. They had to talk to Starling Marte, Eduardo Escobar, all the other free agents they didn't sign that they were talking to that they were probably interested in. So you have to prioritize these free agents, and they ultimately prioritized Max Scherzer over anyone else. But I think the original plan was Syndergaard comes back, and then you get one of Gausman, Ray, or Scherzer, not Marcus Stroman. Now, maybe they felt like the ceiling was higher with a Scherzer, a Ray, or a Gausman than Stroman, which is a fair argument if you look at some of the advanced metrics this past year. Maybe that's where their head was at. After Syndergaard ends up signing with the Angels, they lose out on him, which was partially due to bad communication. But again, the Mets get a draft pick. I'm not going to crush them on the Syndergaard thing. It ended up working out for them. But they then pursue Steven Matz. So that tells you maybe the type of pitcher they're looking to add. Right now, we're all hypothesizing on they might trade Jeff McNeil for a starter. And everyone just goes straight to Luis Castillo. But Luis Castillo with the Reds as an ace for that team is going to require a huge package, which goes against the grain of everything that Billy Epler has laid out with the Mets plans this offseason. So do you really think that they are suddenly going to go all in, trade Jeff McNeil and Ronnie Mauricio and maybe something else to acquire Luis Castillo? I don't know if they will do that. I think it might be a starting pitcher we're not even thinking about that they would trade Jeff McNeil or J.D. Davis or Dominic Smith for. That's closer to a fifth starter, closer to the Zach Greinke type than the Luis Castillo type. And again, if you're going to do that, Greinke's just sitting there in free agency. There's other arms in free agency I think the Mets should pursue. So if these were the plans, and then you get back to this idea that you're all in, I do wonder if there was a missed opportunity with Marcus Stroman. Because, yes, Marcus Stroman wanted to be prioritized, I'm sure. Marcus Stroman wanted to hit that certain number. But if there was an open line of communication, and Marcus Stroman could have got an inkling that there was a chance that he could get his $25 million a year and pitch in a rotation that had Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer in it, that was going to go for a World Series with a team that it seemed like he enjoyed pitching for, maybe Marcus Stroman would have waited it out. Maybe Marcus Stroman would have been open to keep a dialogue going. But when you don't talk to Marcus Stroman, when you give the impression that Gausman and Ray are your preferred targets over a Marcus Stroman, if you make him feel like he's the fourth guy that you're looking at, and you might not even be looking at him, why the hell would he even consider signing with the New York Mets? And I do wonder if that was a mistake, and that's what I want to talk about more in just a minute. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year, new updated desktop and mobile website. So sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using the promo code Locked On. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. Now, before I get into some slight criticism of the Mets front office, I just want to acknowledge on the front end that I'm nitpicking here. Okay, overall, they pair Max Scherzer with Jacob deGrom. Home run of an offseason. Round of applause to the boys, Sandy Alderson, Billy Upper. Great job. Great job across the board. But I just want to revisit how they handled Marcus Stroman in particular. Because I still, as we sit here, and it's now January and we're in the middle of a lockout, I look back a couple months ago, and the thing that I didn't get at the time is why it appeared like the Mets were prioritizing Kevin Gausman and Robbie Ray over Marcus Stroman. Now, we don't know what Stroman was like behind the scenes. I don't think he was a problem at all. I think he was a consummate professional as far as his conduct on the field, going into work every day. His work ethic is second to none. You see the way he prepares his body. You see the way he prepares himself mentally. He is a fierce competitor. He goes out, gives you a chance to win. I don't see what could be wrong with Marcus Stroman, but maybe the Mets decided that they had to just turn over this clubhouse. Maybe he had a lot of sway in the clubhouse. For whatever reason, they decided that that was untenable. Almost similar to where you're at with Jeff McNeil. But it also seemed like Marcus Stroman had a lot more friends on this team than Jeff McNeil does. So again, there's no way for me sitting in this seat to have any clear indication of what went on behind the scenes. So I'm not judging anything off of that. I'm just judging performance. I'm not talking about performance. I don't see how Marcus Stroman is not a better bet over a 5-year deal than Kevin Gausman or Robbie Ray. I really don't see it. I understand that the ceiling might be higher with Robbie Ray and even Gausman to a certain extent because they have stuff that's maybe a little bit more unhittable. But Marcus Stroman pitches to weak contact. Marcus Stroman has great movement on all his pitches. Marcus Stroman is a really good bet in my eyes to be a durable starting pitcher moving forward with the amount of time, money, energy he's putting into his body. And I look at the next 6 years of Major League Baseball, and I don't think there's very many pitchers that are going to be more productive than Marcus Stroman. And I'm not talking about Cy Youngs and All Stars and being an ace. I'm talking about being good at your job as a starting pitcher. And the job of a starter is to go out every fifth day and give your team a chance to win. And the way Marcus Stroman competes out there, the way he fields his position, the way he brings energy to the mound, to his team when they're behind him, all the things that he brings intangibly and tangibly, if you're talking about the way he was able to go out and pitch to a 3.02 ERA, I just think that he's a pretty solid bet moving forward to continue to be, if nothing else, a really quality starting pitcher. And when I look at Gausman and Ray, I have some more question marks with those particular pitchers that were in free agency. Now, Scherzer is a whole different breed. And again, by getting him, the Mets ultimately win. But I never understood why it seemed like they were prioritizing the other guys over Stroman. Because had they at least had a dialogue, had they made it clear that they were interested, maybe they could have still been in the running. And then suddenly Marcus Stroman and his agent, they're trying to get a deal before the 11th hour as you get towards a lockout. And what comes across the desk, which the Cubs jumped on? Essentially a 2-year, $50 million deal or a 3-year, $75 million deal. Either way, that contract would have fit absolutely perfectly into the Mets window. Short-term, big money deal. Right in line with Canna, right in line with Scherzer, right in line with Escobar, right in line with all the contracts they signed. You don't have to lose any free agents. This isn't like Noah Syndergaard or Michael Conforto where the Mets got a comp pick for Stroman walking. He just pitched on the qualifying offer. So there was nothing to gain by Stroman leaving. So you had an opportunity potentially, had the dialogue been open, had there been more clear communication, had you showed that you valued Marcus Stroman, just maybe not as much as you valued Max Scherzer, which would have been understandable for Marcus Stroman. I don't think Stroman fancies himself a better pitcher than Max Scherzer, but he certainly fancies himself a better pitcher than Gausman or Ray. And while there's mixed opinions on that, he has a good argument. So had there been a little bit more of an effort put into maintaining that relationship, maybe you're sitting in a situation right now where you are in this lockout period looking at a rotation that would have had Stroman, Scherzer, DeGrom with the lineup you just revamped. I mean, you'd be a bullpen away from being the favorite. Now there's still more work that has to be done. And I think that the Mets would be wise to, maybe cut their losses a bit when it comes to this idea of adding another huge impact starter, because I think they already did that with Scherzer. And the cost of acquisition to trade for one, to me, would be off the table. I don't love any of these packages that get thrown around for some of these top tier starters. Um, and with that, maybe you have to take a flyer on Rodon in free agency. And that just brings you back to this idea that if you're going to pay him a huge injury concern, upwards of $20 million, even if it is a 1-year deal, you could have had the surest thing in Marcus Stroman. And with a rotation that has a lot of question marks, it would be nice to have one variable that you could count on. I guess two with Scherzer. If you had Scherzer and Stroman and then the hope that DeGrom is healthy, man, the Mets could have been something special, but they might still be. And that's why this is just me nitpicking and not a full criticism of Billy Epler and the crew. Ultimately, they've done a great job, but I think they might have missed or they might have dropped the ball a bit with Stroman. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, I'll once again be joined by Javi Reyes. We're going to get into a conversation that I think might be more interesting than it looks on the surface. Which $340 million shortstop would you rather have, Fernando Tatis Jr. or Francisco Lindor? I know the answer seems obvious, but I'll do my best to make a case for Lindor tomorrow. We'll also talk about the collapses both of those teams suffered, the Padres and the Mets. So that'll be a good show. Make sure you tune into that. You can follow Locked On Mets wherever you get podcasts or on Twitter at Locked On Mets. You can follow me at Finkelstein Ryan. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Get daily picks, blowout specials, wrong team favorite picks, and Lee Sterling's lock of the day by following Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.